On August 28, 1963, more than 200,000 Americans gathered in Washington, D.C. for a political rally known as the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke last after a long list of speakers and musicians, not necessarily because he wanted to speak last, but because nobody else wanted to speak last. People thought the news media and the reporters would have gone away by then, and everybody else kind of wanted their voice heard. So he prepared a nice, short 4-minute speech. But about halfway through that speech, there was a shout out from behind the podium. And it said, "Tell them about the dream, Martin." And it was the voice of singer Mahalia Jackson. She was referring to a speech he gave several months before where he talked about the dream he had for America. Now that was 1963, 54 years ago. And what has happened to that dream? Has it come true? Are we there yet? Now, I'm not yet 54 years old, but even if I were, I would have just been a baby when this speech was given, so I wouldn't remember that day. But really, it's important that we all remember these things that happened. It is important that we remember especially the injustice that has happened to our fellow neighbors, or family members, or friends, or people we don't even really know. The injustice that's happened to Americans. Perhaps our laws have changed, but many attitudes have not. So the last time that I preached here, we were talking about a refugee family, and we were kind of going through what a refugee family would go through if they started in their home in safety and security and then are uprooted and suddenly thrown into the unknown. And I asked you all a question. Where is the Messiah in that story? Where is the Messiah in the movement of refugees? Now, I asked you to actually tell me. This time I won't. You don't have to respond this time. But I thought about that again at this situation. Where is the Messiah in this story? And really, it's something we preachers sort of ask ourselves anytime we create our sermons. Where is the Messiah in the message of dreams and remembering injustice? Well, the Messiah here today, through our readings, is being baptized, just like any one of us could be baptized. Jesus comes to John to be baptized, and John's reaction is so on point. What? You want me to baptize you? Because God is showing us that even when God is among us, God is one of us. We are not only created in God's image, but God chose to be one of us. And scholars have debated over the years whether Jesus even needed to be baptized. I mean, Jesus was perfect, right? So why would Jesus even need baptism? Well, I'm sorry, but I just don't think baptism is really about perfection, is it? It's not about making us perfect or we were perfect before we were baptized. Baptism is about our relationship with God and the promises that God has made to us to love us just as we are. And yes, we have come rather far in our society from 1963, but for some, this year's election was a wake-up call. A few days after the election, I was talking to a lot of different people, and there was one interaction that I had kind of over and over again. It started with one gentleman that I was talking to who was about a middle-aged white guy, and he said to me that he couldn't believe that Donald Trump had been elected even after saying such horrible things about women. And it kind of took a step back, and I said, welcome to my world. Welcome to the world of being a woman. Welcome to what we have to hear all the time, because we hear this crap every day, and you're just now realizing it? Are we not educating the men of our nation about what we have to put up with? And maybe that's it. Maybe we've become so comfortable with the victim blaming and the women bashing and the mansplaining that it's not even noticeable. And it is a myth that women who dress seductively are asking to be catcalled or asking to get attention. Because I recently bought a scooter, and I'm 38 years old, and I have never gotten catcalled more on my scooter than any other time in my life. Does my helmet say, "Please whistle at me"? "Oh, thank you for this comment that I did not ask you to make"? No, it does not. And if I hear another middle-aged white guy tell me they can't believe Donald Trump said all those degrading words about women, I'm going to speak up rather than roll my eyes. Because speaking up is an important lesson. And what does it mean now for us to remember the injustice of the past? Remember that when we abuse others, we abuse the least of us, we are abusing God. Ignoring the importance of humanity of other people is to place God below ourselves. Because even though I don't remember the water cannons and the police brutality and the burning of churches, I can't forget that these things happened. We are not even a generation away from those who marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Those people are still alive, and they remember the blast of the cannon and the crack of the police baton and the heat of the flames. And you know what? We can learn from them. We can listen to their stories. Because as Martin Luther King Jr. said, we must live as brothers or we will perish as fools. And when I think about the dream, and I think about all of the dreams that he had, I think about one of my favorite poems, and it's called Harlem, also known as A Dream Deferred by Langston Hughes. And it was written in 1951, so before the dream speech was even made. But there's something about this poem that makes me wonder what happened to that dream. I'm going to read it for you now. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? We are at a time when that dream of Dr. King's is ready to explode. With this year's election, hateful rhetoric, xenophobia, homophobia, sexism lurking around every tweet, around every street, it's no wonder that the country is feeling the pull of us versus them. We no longer have signs that say for whites only, but people still continue to be oppressed in subtle and sometimes obvious ways. I think this is why women all over the country want to speak up and be heard. I think this is why the Women's March on Washington is at a critical time in our nation's history. We are tired of being talked over and talked to. And until men and women can hold hands in equality, until women are paid for equal work, until women are no longer being raped behind dumpsters, until women are no longer judged by the color of their dress, but by the content of their character, then it will always be that all men are created equal. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "In the end, we will remember the words of our enemies. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." I encourage you, my friends, to speak up for injustice, to speak up for equality, to speak up for your rights and the rights of others. And I am especially speaking to those of you with privilege. Speak up for someone who does not have a voice. Because God has said to us that we are loved so much that Jesus became baptized just like one of us. He reached out to the lowly He ate with the despised, and he spoke with respect to women who nobody else respected. And also in that same breath, God says to us that anyone who disrespects us, we must remember, is also a beloved child of God. And that is sometimes a difficult pill to swallow. Because we cannot pick and choose who is in and out of God's family. The men who catcall, the legislators who want to take away our rights, the misogynist jokesters, all children of God. But we look back and we learn from the past. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. And hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Love. 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 And I think it's time for that love to explode.